Welcome to pairing Apple School Manager with an MDM solution. I'm Betty, and I'm a Jamf education sales engineer based in the US outside of Portland, Oregon. It's my pleasure to be here today. Let's take a look at our agenda. We'll first start with a high-level look at MDM and how it works with Apple School Manager to ease your school's Apple device deployment. From there, we'll walk through various aspects of Apple School Manager, things that you'll encounter as you start staging your devices and data. With these elements in place, we'll pull it all together by looking at device enrollment and content distribution. Finally, I'll share a list of resources that will help guide the way as you start planning your deployment. For those who may be joining us for the very first time, allow me to introduce Jamf. At our core, our mission statement is clear. Jamf helps organizations succeed with Apple, and we currently help more than 47,000 organizations manage over 20 million Apple devices and counting. When education organizations need the world leader in Apple management, they turn to Jamf. This includes the world's largest K-12, primary and secondary schools, and the best universities around the globe. We offer a portfolio of enterprise-grade solutions to help you tackle authentication, device management, and endpoint protection challenges in the Apple ecosystem. Underpinning it all is Jamf Nation, the world's largest community of Apple administrators, with more than 100,000 of your fellow admins who are keen to connect, learn, and grow. Today's webinar is focused on device management, and we'll be highlighting Jamf Pro and Jamf School and how those intersect with Apple School Manager. So that's a little bit about who we are, but as we're getting into things, I'm going to take a step back even further. When our founders first began, almost 19 years ago, they were looking for a better way to manage hundreds of Macs at a university in Wisconsin. With this, they laid the foundation for what's now known as Mobile Device Management, or MDM. So what is it? MDM systems like Jamf Pro and Jamf School are solutions that use Apple's management protocol to offer secure and wireless device configuration, some of which includes updating software, defining device settings, distributing apps and books, and remotely wiping and locking devices. Putting that into some context, you're likely here watching this webinar because you work with schools and technology. Maybe you're an admin from a small school district with just one or a handful of schools, or on the other hand, maybe your district is massive with hundreds of schools and locations. As to technology, either you have Apple devices or you're seriously looking into it. What all this boils down to is a lot of devices that need to be assigned appropriately, outfitted with apps and settings, and be ready to go once they reach students' hands. Now, without MDM, this is daunting. It would mean a crazy spreadsheet to try and keep track of everything, going through all the setup screens on each iPad, and entering your Apple ID to individually download each app on each device. MDM, alongside Apple School Manager, gives you the ability to manage devices and disperse content at scale. Here you can see two of Jamf's MDM solutions that will help bring organization and ease to this process. Jamf School is our purpose-built Apple management solution that helps IT and educators spend less time managing technology and more time investing in their classrooms. Jamf Pro is the gold standard in Apple management for large-scale school districts. Both products offer an incredible array of features and come with full access to Jamf's education apps that are available in the App Store. The dashboards you see here are the first pages you're greeted with when logging into your Jamf server. They provide a simple visual overview of your deployment so you can quickly address the most pressing needs. With Jamf, you'll be able to easily deploy and configure devices for your staff and students while simultaneously providing teachers with tools to create engaging learning experiences. And instead of that crazy spreadsheet, Jamf and Apple School Manager connect with what you already have in place, your student information system. All that data, your staff, students, and classes, can get populated into Apple School Manager and then reflected in Jamf, so everywhere you go, it looks the same. You're only maintaining one source of truth. So if you're ready to move away from manual processes, let's explore how Apple School Manager is the first step towards automation. Apple School Manager is Apple's web-based portal that education organizations like yourself use to manage their users, devices, and content distribution. As far as managing your organization, Apple School Manager allows you to add administrator accounts to help manage users, content, and devices within the platform. For user accounts, managed Apple IDs can be leveraged through Apple School Manager. These are school-owned accounts and may sometimes have a suffix like @appleid.yourschool.com or something similar that you'll choose while defining your Apple School Manager settings. These accounts provide access to a number of Apple services, collaboration features, and 200 gigs of iCloud storage per account for free. If your school utilizes Microsoft Azure Active Directory, existing account credentials can be integrated using federated authentication. This means staff and students can use the logins they already know to log on to iPad, Mac, iCloud, and schoolwork. With the help of Apple School Manager, you can easily automate MDM enrollment and simplify initial device setup. To do this, we assign devices to an MDM like Jamf Pro or Jamf School for automated device enrollment, or what used to be called DEP. If you're new to all this, enrollment is the process of establishing a connection between each of your devices and your MDM, like Jamf. This allows devices to regularly submit their inventory information to Jamf and allows you to perform configuration, security, and distribution tasks on the device. Automated device enrollment also adds supervision to your devices, so you can apply additional control over device configuration and restrictions. When it comes to content like apps and books, Apple School Manager and Jamf work together so your school can buy content in bulk, assign it to devices, and then install and update it wirelessly without the need for individual Apple IDs. You can also revoke and reassign apps to different devices so your school retains full ownership and control of purchased apps. Finally, if you have different buildings or campuses, you can easily transfer and share licenses between them. So these three aspects of Apple School Manager, user accounts, devices, and content, are the foundation of the platform. And once your account is up and running, you'll also have access to shared iPad workflows and teaching and learning facilitation through Apple's Classroom and Schoolwork apps. If all this sounds like a lot, you're not wrong. Apple School Manager is an incredibly robust portal. You probably won't need everything on day one. So as you define which features to focus on first, keep in mind that everything else will be there when you're ready to explore further. And Jamf can even provide some best practices and workflow suggestions as you navigate which features work best for your school. So now that you have a sense of what Apple School Manager offers, let's get you signed up and familiarized with what it looks like. Signing up is simple. Just navigate to school.apple.com and select Enroll Now at the bottom of the login window. Enrollment is free, but please note, due to Apple's verification process, it can take a few days to complete. After your account is active, when you first sign into Apple School Manager, you'll be presented with a Setup Assistant. The Setup Assistant allows you to add managers and import your student, staff, and class information. As I mentioned previously, there are a lot of options here, so some of which you may not be ready to set up initially, and that's okay. Come back to it later. Like we talked about earlier, you can leverage the data you already maintain by integrating your student information system. Some SIS vendors support direct connection. This allows Apple School Manager to be periodically updated with changes from your SIS. So if a student joins 2 weeks into the semester, a managed Apple ID will be ready for them on day 1. And just in case you're worried about keeping data clean, all updates only work one way. In other words, at no time is data written back to your SIS. If your student information system does not support direct integration, you can use the Secure File Transfer Protocol, or SFTP, to upload all data from your SIS to Apple School Manager. So work with your data administrators to define that recurring day and time schedule to perform this action so that Apple School Manager is updated as often as you feel necessary. Finally, if your school uses Microsoft Azure AD, you can use SCIM, or the System for Cross-Domain Identity Management, to import user accounts. Using this system, you merge Apple School Manager properties, such as classes and roles, over the account data that's imported from Azure AD. Ultimately, we recommend contacting your SIS vendor to determine which of these solutions will work best for you and your school. Oftentimes, we only learn the what and the how in tech webinars. So let's take a minute and chat about why you'd want to make this connection. Once your SIS is integrated with Apple School Manager and later with Jamf, you can pull that information to quickly create school rosters and classes, easily assign devices to preloaded users, and automatically generate managed Apple IDs for all users. You'll also gain access to shared iPad functionality, managed book distribution, the Schoolwork app, and managed classes in both Apple Classroom and Schoolwork. All to say, there's no shortage of benefits, and with information only passing in one direction, your data stays clean and up to date. At this point, we'll assume that you successfully navigated the Setup Assistant and are ready to get started. To help get our bearings, I'll highlight a couple main features within Apple School Manager, starting first with locations and user accounts. For each one, I'll give you a high-level overview and then zoom in to see it up close. Locations can be used to separate your data. They're especially helpful if you manage more than one school or campus, so your instance can mirror that physical location. When you sign up for Apple School Manager, your first location will be automatically created, and then when you integrate your SIS, all of those locations can be synchronized as well. If you need to manually add a new location, just click the plus sign at the top of the window. For every location, a volume purchasing token will be generated that can then be used, together with Jamf, to manage your apps and books. Next up are roles, which is how Apple School Manager defines account permissions. Use these to add administrators who can help manage your locations, users, devices, and content. The Roles pane shows you all of Apple School Manager's predefined roles. Here you can link accounts to the appropriate role based on function. Some of the most common include administrators, who command the most access and are able to edit permission sets for each role. People managers oversee individual accounts and classes. Device enrollment managers can help with devices and MDM servers. And content managers can manage and procure licenses for apps and books. As you see here, clicking on a role provides a description and an outline of their privileges. If you'd like to see which user account is tied to each role, you can either click the Show button, which will take you into accounts, or go directly to accounts to search by user instead of by role. After you square away your roles and locations, you might look to accounts next. User accounts will automatically generate managed Apple IDs. The accounts themselves are initially created when you integrate your SIS, upload a CSV file using SFTP, or they'll be linked to if using Azure AD. They can also be manually created. Under the Accounts tab, you'll see a list of all teacher, student, and staff accounts, as well as each account's role. Once these accounts are in place, managed Apple IDs are automatically generated for your users. Unlike personal Apple IDs, managed Apple IDs are owned and managed by your school or district and are designed to meet the needs and legal requirements of education institutions, including password resets, limitations on purchasing and communications, and role-based administration. You can also inspect specific managed Apple IDs if needed, since this is a school-owned account. As we previously discussed, these come with 200 gigs of iCloud storage and provide access to Apple services like the Schoolwork app and collaboration with iWork and Notes. They're also required if your school plans to utilize shared iPad functionality. While there are plenty of use cases for working within individual accounts, when you need to perform bulk actions, simply select All Accounts, which will open up a number of tasks, including sending new sign-in credentials or adding roles and locations. If you need to make adjustments to a specific group, use the filtering options to help narrow down your list of users. The last item in this section is classes. Just like it sounds, Apple School Manager defines classes as a collection of instructor and student accounts. Based on your SIS integration or SFTP upload, they're automatically synced to the platform. After a class is created, it's used with your MDM to enable classes to appear in Apple's Classroom app, Jamf's education apps, and to simplify the experience for students using shared iPad. Here, we're initially presented with a list of all classes. Selecting a specific class provides more detailed information, like the location, who the instructors are, and the number of students assigned. As there are changes throughout the year, remember that these can get updated automatically through your SIS integration, and that same data will also sync to Jamf Pro or Jamf School. So once your users, locations, and classes have been staged, it can be a good time to start focusing on devices. Apple School Manager plays a crucial role in setting up iPad, Mac, and Apple TV. Through automated device enrollment, you'll be able to seamlessly enroll school-owned devices in your MDM solution, so you're not having to physically touch devices before users get them. Because of this, students will be equipped with the learning resources they need the minute they turn on their device. To help illustrate, I'm going to walk through how devices, Apple School Manager, and MDM all fit together. For this example, we'll assume your devices were purchased through Apple. Don't worry if they weren't, we'll cover that in just a second. So once the devices are purchased, they get directly attached to your Apple School Manager account. Apple School Manager's device enrollment service lets you automatically enroll devices in your MDM. As we talked about, an MDM server like Jamf Pro or Jamf School is then used to manage devices. Therefore, in order to connect your devices to Jamf, we'll need to first establish trust between Apple School Manager and Jamf. This is done with an exchanging of tokens, beginning with a public key file from Jamf and then passing back a token from Apple School Manager. Once complete, you can then use Apple School Manager to assign those devices to your MDM server. For a more step-by-step overview of how to integrate Jamf with Apple School Manager, we'll share a link in the chat and again at the end of the webinar. With trust established, we can now navigate to devices in Apple School Manager in order to add them to that specific MDM server we created for Jamf. This will facilitate devices enrolling into Jamf with automated device enrollment. If you only need a specific set of devices, we can again use the filters at the top to narrow down our selection. Here you can filter by a number of options, including order number, so you can select all devices from a particular purchase. Just like with other areas of Apple School Manager, if we select the total number of devices, we'll be able to perform bulk actions like editing the device management, or in other words, assigning them to Jamf. When we click Edit Device Management, a pop-up will appear so you can select the appropriate MDM server. And soon after, you can click Continue, and then all selected devices will be in Jamf. After integrating your MDM with Apple School Manager, you can now take advantage of two main enrollment types: automated device enrollment and device enrollment, also known as manual enrollment. Both kinds are for school-owned devices, but there are some differences that will affect which one you'll choose. For instance, regarding operating system, all Apple operating systems can be enrolled through automated device enrollment. With manual enrollment, however, you're limited to only iOS, iPadOS, and tvOS devices. Unfortunately, macOS cannot be enrolled with this method. Another determining factor is where your devices were purchased. If you buy devices directly from Apple, an authorized Apple reseller, or cellular carriers, you can employ automated device enrollment. This means that your devices will be automatically linked to your Apple School Manager account. For devices that were purchased another way, or maybe you received them through a donation or a grant, you can leverage manual enrollment to get them into Apple School Manager. To accomplish this, you'll need to use the macOS app Apple Configurator 2. As far as user experience, the biggest difference is a 30-day provisional period during which the user has the option to remove the MDM profile. But after the 30 days expire, the device will permanently be enrolled in the MDM. The last area to highlight is that either method will add supervision to your devices. With supervision, you can execute much more granular management capabilities and security enforcements over the device. Let me give you a couple examples. So things like loss mode, which allows you to remotely lock and locate a missing device. You can also disable activation lock. Before we move on, I just want to mention that there is a third type of enrollment called user enrollment that can be used for personally owned devices. If this is a need at your school, check out the link in the chat for more information. So automated device enrollment. You've been hearing brief descriptions about what it is and how to get your devices ready for it, but how about what it actually looks like? Here I have a new iOS device. When it's powered on for the very first time, the user will select the country, language, and join a network. At that point, all devices go through an activation process, which in our case connects to Apple School Manager and then to Jamf, our MDM. Once the Jamf server is connected, the user gets presented with this remote management screen, indicating that the device will now be managed and supervised. In addition to managing the device, automated device enrollment can also customize the setup process by adding a user agreement and skipping many of the screens you'd have to go through if this was a personally owned device. Here, we need only enable location services, and with the rest skipped, we'll be taken immediately to the home screen. Now we'll see a custom wallpaper come down, along with a predefined home screen layout. Finally, we have new apps that are being installed silently without an Apple ID pop-up. Automated device enrollment makes all this possible. It simplifies the setup process for your staff and students so they can use their Apple device right out of the box, and that device will be managed and configured, all without IT having to touch it. Before we close out our time, let's touch briefly on the last thing we just saw, how those apps were deployed by Jamf. We mentioned that Apple School Manager can be used to help distribute content. This is what that looks like. Under Apps and Books, we can procure licenses for both paid and free content, so it can then be deployed to all your devices with Jamf. Additionally, deploying Apps and Books with MDM can ensure they are non-removable. In order to integrate Apps and Books with Jamf, we'll need to exchange tokens. This process is similar to what's needed when you first integrate Jamf with Apple School Manager. We'll share a link to the step-by-step process within the chat. Once Jamf is integrated, navigate to Apps and Books within Apple School Manager and simply search for whichever app is needed. Select the app, and now click to find the corresponding location. Remember that you can procure licenses for multiple locations, which is especially helpful if different departments or schools have separate budgets. And if needed, licenses can always be transferred between locations after the fact. Once you've selected your location, input the quantity of app licenses that are needed and click Get. Depending on the quantity of licenses, in just a few minutes, you'll see those 500 licenses within the Manage License list, and in Jamf, it'll be ready to deploy. Now, simply repeat this process for the rest of your apps and books you'll be deploying. With this last piece in place, you'll be ready to seamlessly integrate Apple devices into your learning environment. We covered a lot of information in today's webinar. We talked about who Jamf is, introduced you to Apple School Manager, and looked a bit more in depth at pairing Jamf with Apple School Manager to manage your organization, deploy devices, and distribute content. Each one of these could have been a webinar in and of itself. So rest assured, we have some additional resources available. The first is a video series from Apple called Getting Started with Apple School Manager. If you prefer webinar-style learning, this is a great resource that further breaks down all the concepts I introduced today. If instead you're more drawn to reference manuals, be sure to check out the Apple School Manager User Guide. We also shared a handful of links in the chat, so if you're watching the recording, feel free to pause here so you can scan and save these links. Jamf also offers a ton of free and paid resources available to help you get up and running. Our professional services can provide on-location or remote services to customize Jamf for your environment. We also offer certification courses and an online training catalog. Finally, we have world-class support from Apple experts across the globe. We even offer 24/7 availability through our premium support packages. So in other words, reach out to us at info@jamf.com or simply scan the QR code you see here for more information. We're here to help. And most importantly, on behalf of Jamf, thank you for joining us today. We'll email the recording as soon as it's ready.